And with that, I'd want to introduce Rick, and he's going to just talk to you guys a little bit about what they did last year in Colorado. He's already answered some of your questions, but go ahead and ask him as many as you can. We're really lucky to have him here, and then Winnie's going to give us a demonstration on how to make rope from hemp. So with that, please, Rick. Give him a nice Iowa welcome.
Thanks, guys. So I'm the owner of a company called Colorado Cultivars, and we planted 300 acres of hemp last year in Colorado. We're about a fifth of the total production in Colorado. We registered about 3,000 acres with our Department of Ag, planted about 1,500 acres, and we were 298 of those 300 acres. Obviously, it's the first real big commercial farm in the U.S. in quite a while, 50-some years, 40-some years since World War II. So with it came some growing pains, and learned, looking at planting 4 or 5 acres, as you guys know, is much different than planting and harvesting 100, 200, 300. Next year, this year, we're looking at doing anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000. The reason the jump is, it's still a pretty big jump, but the reason the jump is only, 5 to 10 times what we're doing now is because the bottleneck's really on the processing side, right? Taking that hemp and turning it into downline products like you see here, like clothing or CBD or food, fabric, plastics. So we feel between 1,000 and 3,000 acres this year will be what we're looking to do. We're still fine-tuning that as we speak right now back home. We found our hemp was found from feral seeds, just seeds, ditchweed in Colorado essentially. So like kind of a big Christmas tree. Our director of agronomy had a big Christmas tree that he found outside of a farm in Colorado. We asked if they wanted it, they didn't. We took it, then used that to create more and more seeds. We started with about 3,500 square foot of greenhouse space, moved up to 12,500 foot of greenhouse space. Again, just ramping up to produce seed because we wanted to plant as much seed as we could, plant as many acres last year as possible, all from seed. We didn't clone, we didn't do initial propagation, just straight seed stock. With that, we had about 26 different cultivars. So we had hemp, and I have a little tablet we can show some pictures later. But hemp that grew from 7, 8 feet up to 10, 11 feet tall. Some of it was bushy, some of it was not as bushy, more thicker stalks with branches. So we have about 4 cultivars now that we have seed stock for planting and for food for this year and next year. So harvesting, we used the regular machinery that had been used, the farm had been used for sorghum, wheat, corn, I think were the 3 main ones. So we use the same processing techniques more or less. We obviously need to fine tune them. There's a bit of nuance to hemp, but we're Americans. We farm. We figure it out, right? We'll definitely get there. And we've gone a long way from where we were last year at this time to where we are today. It's night and day difference, right? But it's not a steep learning curve. I mean, it's just nuance. What else? We grew mainly for seed, for food, and we grew for CBD, for the medicinal properties, the non-psychoactive medicinal properties of the cannabis plant. Process, so from seed all the way to sale. So we process it, harvest it, dry it. Question?
Let's go back to harvesting. So when you're stripping this, you strip it like corn stalks, or you just take the corn off?
That's what we're looking to do this year. Yeah. So
or can it be shook? Can you shake it enough to get the seeds out?
The seeds probably, but I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. We haven't tried that, but
the reason I'm saying that is they got a machine that does aronia berries.
Okay.
And so, what was that one, Dad? I think it went right down the middle of that aronia berry, and it folded it. You pulled it over the side and shake it. Then you come back on the other side and you just take the other aronia berries on that side of it and shake the berries off and leave your bush. Wasn't that one of them, Dad? And so I don't know how if you.
So the way we got our seeds, so seed is very important to us, right? Especially as it's a new crop in a new area, a new region. So our number one concern was saving the seed, right? So we tried one pass. We did about, I think, 5 pivots, so about, between 40 and 60 per pivot. We would hand cut it and then take it, and then we'd separate the seed. We'd use the seed separation machine to separate this from shake it. It would shake it. Separate out the seed, we dry it first, then separate the seed, and then pull the leaves off and the buds off. Then take that, and then that's what we would process for the CBD. But we would cut it, dry it, and then separate the seeds. So, and that was just, we just had a big, and I'll show you pictures, an old seed separation machine that we look at, from the 50s. So as far as doing it in the field at heart, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. We haven't tried it. We are going to be doing some female-only hand planting on probably one pivot for a higher CBD, because the flowers of the female yields more medicine, cannabinoid medicine, than we planted all from seed. So we had male, female, monoecious and dioecious was kind of all over the place, right? So we're going to do a female-only field this next year, and then we're going to do some other fields in different areas like high latitudes and such. So we're going to be experimenting with some different processes, right? From harvesting to drying, seed separation, extraction, right? And then the fiber in the herd, which Winnie will show us, that's its own process also. So there's a lot of different things you can do with a plant, and what type of plant and how you harvest it will depend a lot on what you want to do with it down the road, right? Do you want seed? Do you want CBD? Do you want stock? So it helps to understand what you want to do or what you want to use it for later. That doesn't really answer your question, I know, but yeah.
Did you try just using conventional combine?
Yeah, we did, and that's what we have a mountain of herd and fiber, right? The outside of the plant and herd's the inside stalk of the plant. Mm-hmm. We have a mountain of it all chipped up. Again, I can show you pictures, but essentially using that to extract for CBD was definitely not efficient at all. We would spend a lot. We use a low temperature ethanol extraction, and then there's a CO2 extraction as well. But with any method, I think there was so much biomass that we were pulling too much plant matter and not enough of the medicine that we wanted to pull.
So at a combine like we use here for our corn and beans and oats and things, and you set it right, everything goes out the back except for the seed. And I didn't know if we could set our John Deere combine we have now to take just the seed out of the plant.
We used the combine, and that's actually true. That's absolutely true. I guess what I was talking about was all the biomass that went out besides the seed. That we would try to extract. Mm-hmm. That didn't work for what we were trying to do.
Sure.
For just getting the seed and separating it, then yeah, that would be that's how we actually started.
If we put our head as high as we could put it and run it off and cut the top of the plant off, thrash that much of it, put the seed in the hopper and throw the rest out the back. Then if you want to harvest the plant, come along and mow it again with a mower conditioner and windrow it, and then come back and bale it.
So that would depend on, that's absolutely possible. That would depend what you would want, the type of cultivar you would want. In that case would be a taller stalk with the buds on the top. Right. So ours, again, we threw seed in the ground and we let Mother Nature do her thing, right? Which was awesome. And that, we don't genetically modify, we don't pull chemicals out or in, we didn't use any pesticides or herbicides. So we had plants that were bushy tree, Christmas tree-like, and we had plants that were tall. It wasn't uniform across, right?
Were all over, not
yeah.
just on the top.
Right. So that made harvesting, as you can imagine, very difficult, right? Because there was so much variance in the type of cultivars we had, right? It wasn't all the same height. The buds were different. The plants themselves were different. This next year we have one cultivar per this pivot, one different seed, so we'll be able to fine tune that process. This year we threw seed in the ground and said, go.
Can you chop it?
Yeah. So they used to use like those scythes, like those long, and then they would come through and they'd pull.
Chop it like silage, hay silage, corn silage.
Yeah.
Destroy the length of the fiber, though.
Right. That's exactly that's the other point. So, yeah, so the ones in China, they grow really, really tall, like 12, 14 feet tall, and then they have a bulb probably about like that size on the top. They grow mainly for fiber, and for that very reason, right? They want the longer fiber. They're short fiber textiles, long fiber textiles. I don't know a ton about the textile industry. We've talked to some. We're going, as part of the road trip, we're going to stop by some textile factories in North Carolina. But there's a lot of steps to textiles, right? And China has it down. I mean, they have it. Decorticating, as we'll see, is very labor intensive, right? Separating that stalk outside from the herd. So as a country, we're not there yet because we don't have the processing capabilities yet, because we haven't done it for 70 years. But it's definitely something we can get there. But to answer your question, the harvesting, we're looking at doing mechanized harvesting. Obviously, I think we were pretty unique in the country as we looked at this from the very, very start, from the seeds in the ground, as a commercial agricultural industrial process, right? As I mean, we're fourth generation farmers that have grown for hundreds of years on this land, right? So they had the machinery, they had the equipment, so that's what we used for our first year to do what we did. We've learned a lot, and we're developing some new ways, some new processes, and some new machinery to help out this year, and we're also going to be a little more uniform on each pivot, right? Because we'll have uniform seeds in those areas, but you can imagine throwing all sorts of it's a little bit different. So we learned a ton this year, but all good things, all good things.
What does Monsanto think of all this?
It's interesting. They've already genetically engineered and patented a hemp plant. Of course. So that I guess that answers that question. They're very.
They got their fingers in it.
They got their fingers in it because I think they realize. I didn't know much about this plant a few years back, right? About the hemp plant or the cannabis plants at all. Once you learn about the plant, what it can do, how it can help the environment, how it can help the farmers, it gives it an alternative crop, renew the soil, all this stuff, remove chemicals from the ground, right? From an environmental standpoint, provide jobs. And once you understand about the plant, once you're educated, at least for me and for most people that I met, it's a no-brainer that this plant just makes sense, right? And once you learn about how it became illegal in the first place, that's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe as a country that happened, right? But it was so kind of quick. Once you get educated, I mean, it's pretty amazing. I think Monsanto and Big Farm and Big Oil and the people that are afraid of it from an economic standpoint, right, are coming around, and they're looking for ways to continue prohibition, looking ways to stop the tide that's coming. Once people realize that the tide's kind of coming over, and people are realizing, hey, it's not a bad plant. It's actually a really helpful plant. And so they've obviously patented it. They have, we have some oil people on the adjacent farm that kind of helped. Took about 75 acres and we're doing some stuff with them. So I think they see the writing on the wall. The challenge for us in the industry is it's very helpful for farmers, and you need regional processing, right? So for Iowa, you're probably not going to grow hemp here and ship it to Denver to have us process, right? You're gonna need local community processing here, right? Be it ethanol refineries, be it whatever it is, CBD, whatever, it needs to stay local, right? Within about 150, 200 miles typically is each little processing center. So from a political standpoint, that's great because it brings jobs to the politicians on both sides of the aisle like it. From a farming standpoint, everything's regional, local, stays within the community, which is good because it helps the community, right? So there's not a lot of downside to the plant.
First of all, I was wondering how sensitive yields are to rainfall. And the other one is more of a statement. I imagine companies like Monsanto and all those other big farm companies, they would see it as direct competition if people switch out, reduce their soybean and corn growing, they're going to lose revenue.
For sure.
Anyway,
That's true. That's why they've already patented, right? They're going to come out with their.
right.
The challenge for them and the beauty of hemp is we don't need Roundup, right? We don't need all those chemicals. We don't need. We being the hemp plants and hemp farmers don't need that, right? So we had an issue with grasshoppers getting after some of our stuff. We did garlic water spray, kept them out. Bees absolutely love. We have bees around the farm. Bees absolutely love it. So in the Christmas time, like the snow falls on pine trees, and like you walk under and shake it, and the snow falls down. Right, someone's walking under, you shake it, whatever. You can do that with pollen. The pollen does the same kind of thing from the hemp plant. So the bees are eating the pollen, and they come up and I shook the plant. Usually the bees would attack you because they're eating and they get pissed off. He just kind of flew back, or she, I don't know, flew back, hung out, and then went back and started eating. I mean, they love, and they ate through, usually end up eating in the middle of August. They ate through almost early October. So they ate for longer, their production then was higher. As we know, bees are very important to the ecosystem. So it's a very good plant for bees as well. Ladybugs, bees come in, I mean, it's a very, so they are afraid of it. They're trying to patent it. And your first question was, I'm sorry?
How sensitive yields are to rainfall.
So we had we had 5 acres of dry farming that we did just to see how it was. The dry farming was probably a little less than half of what we did on the pivot. But again, we had a pretty dry year this year. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
What would the corn be if you had corn in a dry year? Would you had corn more than the corn would have probably?
Yeah, and the hemp, I mean, again, we did a bunch of different varieties there to see what would happen. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't growing, dry farming growing was definitely not optimal compared to pivot. And Colorado, I think we had less rainwater than normal this year, or 2015. Says the use that we currently had. That was difficult, I think, because two factors. Mainly, the number one was because we threw out so many different cultivars. It wasn't all uniform, right? So harvesting on that scale, when it's not uniform, is its own challenge, right? But this next year, we're going to be more uniform in the different plots, but we're going to be using the same harvesting equipment with retrofitted with different heads with, where you can look at using some rubber to get in there instead of chop. So to kind of strip, essentially take and strip the stalk and then cut the stalk later. So we'll strip it of all the stuff, take that flower and leaves and seeds, separate it, and then process. But we're processing we want that flower and we want that seed. So we're processing just for those two pieces for now.
Where are you guys located at?
Northeast Colorado. So I don't know if you guys are familiar. We have Colorado's, square state. Denver's kind of in the middle, up about an hour, and then over towards Kansas about an hour. So we're about an hour and a half diagonal northeast of Denver, called Eaton, Colorado.
Do the leaves have any usable purpose at this point?
So we're actually working with a formulator to take and juice the leaves, like wheatgrass. You can juice the leaves, and that cannabis juice is not psychoactive at all. There's no THC at all. And that juice has a lot of just nutritional. So one company in Colorado takes those leaves and then essentially grinds them and powderizes them and uses it like a crystal light or like a powdery drink. But yeah, there's definitely nutrition and value in the leaves by themselves.
If you had to choose one, the fiber over the seeds, which one's going to be more viable?
Seeds right now.
Okay.
Fiber, my personal opinion is fiber, American-made hemp textiles are still a few years out. We need to, as you'll see when Winnie does her presentation, we need to figure a way to automate and either mechanically or chemically strip the fiber from the herd, and then take that herd and process it. Right now, that infrastructure is not here, and it's very difficult to compete with Chinese labor in a cost-effective manner, right? Because Chinese labor, it's a very labor-intensive process in China. They can afford to do that, right? We can't.
Does it need to be separated for cellulose ethanol production?
Yeah. Yeah, because for that, you want the herd, you want the inside of the plants.
Okay.
The fiber, the outside is mainly textiles, car parts, we have a menu, you come on the bus here after, we have uses of hemp, and it kind of shows the different things that the plant can do. So when you go afterwards, I can take you out there, we can show you, kind of walk you through the different spots. But the herd, that's what provides the sugars, that's what provides the stuff for plastic, it's all the herd.
And so just to speak to that really quickly, one of the interesting things I learned when I was at Pure Vision, which was the biorefinery I showed you, corn stover, right? I don't know if you guys know, but DuPont and Storm Lake Emmitsburg, they're both actually stalled. So when there's low oil prices, those both are very stalled because it doesn't make sense for them to be producing the ethanol. There's two reasons for that. One, prices. Two is they have a conversion rate from pulp to sugar, which is then converted to ethanol, of about 60%. It's very inefficient. Because of its high cellulosic content, the processes for hemp are up to 99% conversion rates to sugar from the 75% cellulose that's already in there. So as you can understand, efficiency-wise, and then on top of that, it's much more biomass per acre, you're getting much more efficient and much more quantity of ethanol out of the cellulose of the hemp plant.
Which means your options, right, from a sales standpoint, just got
Much better.
How does the hemp fiber compare to the efficiency, let's say, of cotton? Or is it just too different, so it's used differently?
So as far as, so there's different properties, right? So cotton, so hemp, let's take like a lab coat, right, that a nurse would wear, a doctor would wear at a hospital.
Right.
The cotton, to make that cotton, it costs a lot more than to make just, if all subsidies aside, than to make it with hemp. In addition, you have, hemp has inherent antimicrobial and antibacterial properties, right? So you get a blood stain, like let's say you get staph, and they actually did this test 3 months ago. You get staph on your lab coat, 5 or 6 or 7 washes with bleach, that staph is still in the fibers of the cotton. That staph after one wash is not in the fibers of the hemp, right? So but it doesn't help the hospitals because they're in the business of having people get sick, right? So as horrible as it sounds, I used to work in a former life. I did kiosk systems where you would check in on hospitals. And we talked to Johnson & Johnson. I was like, we have an antimicrobial, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, we want people to get it, which I was like, that blew my mind. But that was honest to God what he told me, right? So I'm not saying that hospitals are trying to get you sick, but I'm saying from an antimicrobial and antibacterial standpoint, hemp is way better than cotton. On a sturdy and wear standpoint, cotton after, let's say, 100 washes will wear through. Hemp actually wears, they say it wears in, right? It's more comfortable, it's softer. From a thermal standpoint, a hemp shirt, like if I go skiing, right? If I wear just a cotton shirt with no undershirt or just a hemp shirt, the hemp shirt will keep me warmer because of the insulated properties of the fiber. There's more air pockets. There's more, it's more insulated. So like socks, alpaca and wool or alpaca and hemp socks, right, are fantastic because you oxidize it too because the surface area you get more oxygen. I'm not a scientist, but it's fantastic. I mean, it's a pretty phenomenal. So what I'm saying is, we just made supercapacitors out of batteries out of hemp. In 5 years, what's going to be made out of this plant, I can't even tell you, right? It's going to be phenomenal. So I think to answer your question, the market for this plant is this plant can be used in so many different things. And that market's growing, right? So cell phones and all that can use hemp. Right?
Is there any feed value for cattle?
So yes, I believe there is. We're trying to get a study with the University of Colorado for next year to use some of the seed cake that we have, and we're actually going to put herd. So that stocky part, we're going to put, because the cows have the 4 stomachs, right? To put their herd in there to slow their digestive system, which will hopefully increase their uptake of the nutrients. So we're going to do reproductive studies. We're trying to get on with CU Boulder to do reproductive studies using hemp instead of using regular feed. So we're going to find that out. But I think there will be.
Are we fighting the wrong end of it by pushing legislation in the state as opposed to pushing legislation in the nation?
So part of what the hemp road trip is doing is there's a law, 2 laws, one in the House and one in the Senate, same law. It's called the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. And what that does, and we're pushing for that on this road tour, what that does is that takes hemp off of the Controlled Substances Act. So it allows anyone federally to grow to be able to grow this legally.
In fact, Senator Grassley is the head of the committee who's sitting on this bill. So if you are interested after you hear our conversation, contact Senator Grassley's office and tell him as a farmer you'd like to see hemp be introduced in Iowa.
Give us the option, yeah.
That would be a huge help for the home road trip and for us as well. With Senator Grassley, he's the head of the Judiciary Committee, and because whenever you legalize hemp, you're taking something off of the Controlled Substances Act, Judiciary is in charge of that. So they sent the Industrial Hemp Farming Act to Senator Grassley.
But DEA or Food and Drug Administration, aren't they in charge of where it falls on?
It's the Attorney General, the President, and ultimately it's the Attorney General and the President. So either one of those, with a stroke of their pen, could change this.
Okay.
But right now we have an act of Congress that could also change it.
But it's a non-legislative decision, is what I was getting.
It could be. If the Attorney General or the President decide to do so, they could do so. But that's the only non-legislative processes that could get this done. So the only other way is to pass an act, and that's what Senator Grassley has the power to do right now, and he's not moving on it.
It's sitting in his committee, right? And it's the same on the House side. It's sitting in their committees. They're not moving on it. There's about 65 co-sponsors on the House side and 10 sponsors on the Senate side. Obviously, call your senators and representatives and let them know they should co-sponsor this if you feel you should be able to have the option to grow this plant. But Boris is absolutely right. I think they passed a law with the last Senate bill. So you could buy hemp and CBD oil and products from China. I could buy it in Denver and then ship it anywhere in the U.S. Prior to December, with this last bill, as a farmer, I couldn't make a hemp product and then sell it across state lines. That was illegal, which is absurd. I could import it and sell it, but the exact same product I couldn't make and sell. That doesn't make any sense, right? And that hurts the farmers. That hurts our economy as a nation. They just passed a part of the bill, the appropriations bill in December, that essentially defunded the Department of Justice and defunded the DEA, and said that if a product is made from hemp in accordance with the Department of Agriculture, which is what we do, right, in Colorado, or my company does in Colorado, we can now ship that across state lines with immunity. Right before, it could be an issue. Each state now has the right to say if you have CBD and the state doesn't allow it, they can still do whatever the state wants to do. But federally, companies that make hemp under the section, that's legally allowed, we can now ship anywhere, which was huge for the industry and huge for new farmers and new states coming on. But to your point, I think you attack both sides. You attack the state, and then once the states all kind of get together, right, that Washington seems to finally come around, right?
Now, it seems really the final thing is public opinion. Do you have any polling data on the opinion of hemp, or is there enough awareness to like move politicians based on
Great
public?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's not a lot, to be honest, on hemp. Hemp's honestly only been around 2 years. There's polling data on the marijuana side. I mean, it's only been reintroduced in the U.S. a couple years ago.
Okay.
There's polling data in cannabis in general, and that's upwards of 85%. Just say it just needs to be decriminalized. So there's that data that we use, but there hasn't been a specific study that I'm aware of, Boris, that deals specifically with hemp and public opinion. Part of what we're doing on this road trip is coming out, educating, sharing information, and hopefully that will help people understand the plant better and understand the opportunity. But we haven't done any actual polling.
And it's one of the reasons we come and talk to you guys, to be honest with you, because it's one thing if me, city guy from Des Moines, goes, I met with Grassley, I sat with him for an hour and a half and talked about nothing but hemp. It's one thing if I talk to him. It's another thing if you give him a call, or if you give him a call, or if anybody in this room, or if everybody in this room gave him a call, then he would have to pay attention. Because this is what he told me. He said, Boris, I like everything you're saying. I think hemp is probably really great. But the last 30 years in my town halls, the only people that support hemp are hippy-dippy people that come in smoking joints and smelling like weed. And so I can't support that. But if farmers are coming to me and asking me for this, I will gladly support it. That's exactly what he told me. So that's really why we're here.
Cover, yeah.
For sure, right? And since he's the head of the judiciary, I think you guys have a lot of political power anyways with the caucuses and all that good stuff coming through, right? And we're excited to be here and be part of that, right? We went to a couple today, some rallies and such, but I think you guys as farmers and as citizens of Iowa have the ability to call and say, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Just give us the option, whether you want to grow it or not. My neighbor wants to grow it, so give us the option of having something different that has revenue that can be 2 to 5 to 8 times what we're getting per acre now, right? So it's an economic decision, really, is what it comes down to, the way I look at it.
Well, we don't have to import it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Why are we shipping $500 million a year to China and Canada when we can make it here? I mean, we can make it here, and we should make it here, right? And the new products that we haven't come up with. Did you have a question?
Yeah, you should have been following Trump around.
Yeah, well, we're going to go see him. We're going to his rally in New Hampshire. So we're going to go and see his rally in New Hampshire.
Iowa's the place to be now.
We saw Ted Cruz this morning.
Yep.
And he stared right at us as we wanted to ask him a hemp question. And I'm pretty sure he saw that, I don't know, maybe he's got a good sixth sense, but he knew that we were trouble. So he moved on to the next guy who seemed like a planted question.
We would only see with our hands up, and he looks around the room like, if you two had your hands up, and I just went like this. That's what's happening. But we got to talk to people, and the bottom line is once you talk to people, once they start to learn, and you can go to our website, you can go online and research, and once you start to realize what the plant can do, particularly economically, it makes sense to at least have it as an option.
Well, it's not helping you either coming out of Colorado, probably, because Colorado's been the limelight on the other side.
Well, they have on the marijuana side, right? So there's still they got roped together in the 20s, right? In the 20s and 30s with yellow journalism and all that craziness.
Together. I like that.
Yeah, right. We'll play on words. I like it. I'm gonna use it all the time. They got roped together intentionally, and people didn't realize the hemp people didn't realize that it was a cannabis plant that was being. They thought it was marijuana. And then once that passed, it was kind of too little too late, right? So it's the same species. They do completely different things. I mean, you can make genes out of marijuana plants just like you can make genes out of hemp plants, right? But what's in front of the federal government now is the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. It has nothing to do. We have nothing to do with marijuana. We're focused specifically on that legislation federally and on educating everyone to let them make their own decisions, but at least provide information that says it's not. We were talking to a semi-truck driver the other day. We had to get the bus repaired in Des Moines, and I go, "Oh, I'm a hemp farmer." He goes, "Oh," and he starts to walk away. I can't. I have a CDL. I can't talk to you. I'm like, "You're not going to get stoned from talking to him. I grow plants, right? It's not psychoactive, but it just took talking to him. And at the end, we sat down and talked about biofuel and all the stuff. And so, it's just a matter of helping people understand. That's all.
So it's like maize or corn.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Blue corn tortillas are regular. Like it's still corn tortilla, but it does different things, right? But hemp and marijuana are a little bit different, as in legally, right? Legally, I can make something out of this plant and I can ship it across to anywhere in the U.S. I couldn't do that if it was marijuana. So.
Now, you say there's no way to tell marijuana from hemp as they're growing side by side?
There's ways to tell about it. The reality is,
can you tell by looking, I guess, is my question.
Fiber.
Yeah,
Because I
if
mean,
it's
like
fiber.
This fiber looks
Yeah.
nothing like what so-called pot plant because they're big and bushy and they're used for the
Yeah, so a marijuana plant is more flowery, more tree-like, right? More bushy because the economic value of marijuana comes from that flower, right? That the cannabinoids on that flower. Hemp, on the other side, there's a big to-do in Colorado down in Pueblo because they have these outdoor marijuana grows. Hemp, if you plant hemp next to marijuana, hemp overtakes the marijuana, and actually the THC, the psychoactive ability of that plant, decreases dramatically because once that plant is pollinated,
They'll cross-pollinate?
yeah. So once the plant, so if I had an indoor, let's say I had a greenhouse and this half was marijuana and this half was hemp. After 1 or 2 harvests, this marijuana would be crap because the pollen stops the cannabinoids, the THC, the CBD, all the different medicinal pieces of the plant stop growing, right? So it halts it or decreases it dramatically. So the marijuana group in Pueblo got really pissed off and actually helped lobby for a law you can't grow hemp within a 5-mile radius of them because they're afraid of the pollen, right? So if you're a marijuana grower, you don't want hemp next to you because it's going to stop. And if you're a hemp grower, you're not concerned with marijuana because it's not going to raise your THC levels.
Well, I was